Magnolia Blossom. Vincent Aston was waiting under the clock at Victorian Station now and then he glanced up at it uneasily. He thought to himself, how many other men have waited here for a woman who didn't come? A sharp pang shot through him. Supposing that you didn't come, that she had changed her mind. Woman did that sort of thing. Was he sure of her? Had he ever been sure of her? Did he really know anything at all about her? He'd not Had not she puzzled him? For the first, here had seemed to be two women, the lovely, laughing creature who was Richard Darley's wife, and the other, silent, mysterious, who had walked by his side in the garden of Herman's Close. Like a Magnolia flower, that was how he thought of her, perhaps because it was under the Magnolia tree that they had tasted their first rapture's incredulous kiss. The air had been sweet with the scent of Magnolia blossom, and one or two petals, velvety, soft, and fragrant, had floated down, resting on that upturned face that was as creamy and as soft, as silent as they. Magnolia blossom, exotic, fragrant, mysterious. That had fortnight ago, the second day he had met her, and now he was waiting for her to come to him forever. Again, incredulity shot through him. She wouldn't come. How could he ever have believed it? It would be giving up so much. The beautiful Mr. Diddle couldn't do this sort of things quietly. It was bound to the to be a 9 days wonder, a far-reaching scandal that would never quite be forgotten. There were better, more acceptant ways of doing these things, a discreet divorce, for instance. But they had never thought of that for a moment, at least he had not. Had she? He wondered. He had never known anything of her thoughts. He had asked her to come away with him almost timorous, for after all he has. What was he? Nobody is particular. One of thousands orange growers in the Transvaal. What a life to take her to after the brilliance of London, and yet, since wanted her so desperately, he must needs ask. She had concerned very quietly, with no hesitations or protests, as though it were the simplest thing in the world that he was asking her. Tomorrow, he had said, amazed, almost unbelieving. And she had promised in that soft, broken voice that was so different from the laughing brilliance of her social manner. He had compared her to a diamond when he first saw her, a thing of flashing fire, reflecting light for 100 facettes. But at the first touch, that first kiss, she had changed miraculously to the clouded softness of a pear like a Magnolia blossom, creamy pink. She had promised, and now he was waiting for her to fulfill the promise. He looked again at the clock. If she did not come soon, they would miss the train. Sharply, a wave of reaction set in. She wouldn't come. Of course, she wouldn't come. Fool that he had been, never, ever to come. What were promises? He would find a letter when he got back to his own, protesting, saying all the things that women do when they are excusing themselves for lack of courage. He felt anger. anger, and the bitterness of frustration. Then he saw her coming towards him down the platform, a faint smile on her face. She walked slowly, without haste or flutes, as one who had all eternity before her. She was in black, soft black that clung with a little black that hat that from the wonderful creamy power of her face. So you are calm after all. Of course, calm, her voice sounded out calm. I thought you wouldn't. Why? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned aside and liquidations, the passing portraits. The next few minutes rolled bustling confusion. Then they were sitting in their reserved compartment at the drop houses of southern London with drifting Bible. Theodore Dollar was sitting opposite him. At last she was his, and he knew now how incredulous up to the very last minute he had been. He had not dared to let himself believe that magical, elusive quality about her had frightened him. It had seemed impossible that she should ever belong to him. Now the suspense was over, the irrevocable step was taken. He looked across at her. She lay back in the corner, quite still. The faint smile lingered on her lips. Her eyes were cast down, the long black lashes swept the creamy curves of her cheek. He thought, what's in her mind now? What is she thinking of? Me? Her husband? What does she think about him anyway? Did she care for him once? Or did she never care? Does she hate him? Or is she indifferent to him? And with a pang, the thought swept through him. I don't know. I never shall know. Never shall know. I love her and don't know anything about her, what she thinks or what she feels. His mind circles round the thoughts of Theodora Darle's husband. He had now plenty of married women who were only too ready to talk about their husband, of how they were misunderstood by them, of how their finer feelings were ignored. Vincent Aston reflected cynically that it was one of the best known opening gambits. But except casually, they had never spoken of Richard Darrell. Aston knew of him what everybody knew. He was a popular man, handsome, with an engaging, carefree manner. Everybody liked Darrell. His wife always seemed on excellent terms with him, but that proves nothing, Vincent reflected. Theo was well bred. She would not air her grievance in public, and between them no word had passed. From that second evening of their meeting, when they had walked together in the garden, silent, their shoulders touching, and he had felt the faint tremor that shook her at his touch, there had been no explainings, no defining of the position. She had turned his kisses, a dumb, trembling creature, shorn of all that hard brilliance which, together with her cream and rose beauty, had made her famous. Never once had she spoken of her husband. Vincent had been thankful for that at the time. He had been glad to be spread the argument of a woman who wished to assure herself and her love that they were justified in yielding to their love. Yet now the racket conspiracy of silence worried him. He had again that penetrating sense of knowing nothing about this strange creature who was willingly linking her life to his. He was afraid. In the impulse to reassure himself, he bent forward and laid a hand on the back guard knee. He felt once again the faint tremor that shook her, and he reached up for her hand. Bending forward, he kissed the palm, a long, lingering kiss. He felt the response of her fingers on his, and looking up met her eyes and was content. He leaned back in his seat. For the moment he wanted to move. They were together. She was his. And presently he said in a light, almost bantering tone, "You are very silent, am I?" "Yes, you are. Sure you don't regret." They did not reply. There was an assurance of sincerity behind it. "What are you thinking of, Washington?" "Think I'm afraid of happiness." He moved over beside her, then held her to him and kissed the softness of her face and neck. "I love you," he said. "I love you." Her answer was in the cleaning of her body, the abandon of her lips. Then he moved back to his own corner. He picked up a magazine, and so did she. Ever now and then, over the top of the magazines, their eyes met. Then they smiled. They arrived at Dover just after 5. They were to spend the night there and cross to the continent of the following day. Dew entered their sitting room in the hotel with Vincent close behind it. He had a couple of evening paper in his hand which they threw down on the table. Two of the hotel servants brought in the luggage and two. Dew turned from the window where she had been standing looking out. In another minute they were in each other's arms. There was a discreet tap on the door, and they drew apart again. "Damn it all," said Vincent. "It doesn't seem as though we were ever going to be alone." Dew smiled. "It doesn't look like it," she said softly. Sitting down on the sofa, she picked up one of the knock proved to be a waiter bearing tea. He laid it on the table, drawing the latter up to the sofa on which Theo was sitting, cast a deft glance round, inquired if there were anything further, and withdrew. Vincent would go on into the adjoining room, come back into the city now for tea. "Anything wrong?" Dew pulled up right on the sofa. She was staring in the front. She was staring in front of her with dazed eyes, and her face had gone definitely white. "Is it hard?" For answer, she held out the paper to him, a finger pointing the headline, "Failure of Hobson Jacqueline Lucis." The name of a big city from conveyed nothing to him at the moment, though he had an irritating conviction in the back of his mind that it ought to do so. He looked inquired in at Drew. "Richard is Hobson, Jackley, and Lucas," he explained. "Your husband?" "Yes." Vincent returned to the paper and read the bold information it conveyed carefully. Processes such as sudden crash, seriously revelations to follow. Other houses affected struck him disagreeable. Roused by a moment, he looked up. Drew was adjusting her little black hat in front of the mirror. She turned to the moment he had. Her eyes looked steadily into his. Vincent, I must go to Richard. He sprang up. Drew, didn't be absurd. Drew, don't be absurd. She repeated mechanically. I must go to Richard, but now she might adjust her toward the paper on the floor. That means ruin. Bankrupt, bankruptcy. I can't choose this day of all other to leave him. You had left him before you heard of this. Be responsible. She shook her head mournfully. You don't understand. I must go to Richard, and from that he could not move her. Strange that a creature so soft, so pliant, could be so unyielding. After the first, she did not argue. She let him say what he had to say unhiddenly. He held her in his arms, seeking to break her will by salving her sense. But through her soft mouth returned his kissing. He felt in her something aloof and invisible that withstood all his pleadings. He let her go to at least, sick and weary of her vain endeavors. From pleading, he had turned to bitterness, reproaching her with never having loved him. That too she took in silence without protest, her face damp and pitiful, giving the lie to his words. Rage masters him in the end. He hurled at her every cruel word he could think of, seeking only the bruises and batter her to her knees. At last the word gave out. There was nothing more to say. He sat, his head in his hands, staring down at the red pile carpet. By the door, Theodore stood, a black shadow with a white face. It was all over. She said quietly, Goodbye, Vincent. He did not answer. The door opened and shut again. The Darrells lived in a house in Chelsea, an intriguing old world house standing in a little garden of its own. Up the front of the house grew a magnolia tree, smutty, dirty, green, but still here. Dew looked up at it as she stood on the doorstep. Some 3 hours later, a sudden smile twisted her mouth in pain. She went straight to the study at the back of the house. A man was passing up and down in the room, a young man with a handsome face and a haggard expression. He gave a ejaculation of relief as she came in. Thank God you are turned up, Drew. They said you are taken your luggage with you and gone off out of town somewhere. I hear the news and come back. Richard Darrell put an arm about her and drew her to the couch. They sat down upon it side by side. Drew drew themselves free of the encircling arm in what seemed a perfectly natural manner. How bad is it, Richard? She asked quietly. Just as bad as it can be, and that's saying a lot. Tell me, he began to walk up and down again as he talked. Drew sat and watched him. He was not to know that every no, and then the room went dim and his voice faded from her hearing. while in another room in a hotel a door come clearly before her eyes. Nevertheless, she managed to listen intelligently enough. He came back and sat down on the couch by her. Fortunately, ended, they can't touch your marriage settlement. The house is your house. Theo nodded thoughtfully. We shall have that at any rate, she said. Then things will not be too bad. It means a fresh start, that is all. Ah, quite so. Yes, but his voice did not ring true. And Theo thought suddenly, there's something else he hasn't told me everything. There's nothing more, Richard, she said gently. Nothing worse. He hesitated for just half a second, then worse. What should there be? I don't know. It will be right, of course. It will be all right. Ah, I am glad you are here. It will be all right now that you are here. You are here. Whatever else happened, I thought you wouldn't die. Yes, you are got me. This time she felt his arm around her. He kissed her and held her close to him as though in some strange way he'd driven comfort from her nearness. I have got you, Drew, he said again presently, and she answered as before, Yes, Richard. He slipped from the couch to the floor at her feet. I'm tired out, he said fretfully. My God, it's been a day. Awfully. I don't know what I should do if you were not here. After all, one's wife is one's wife, isn't she? She did not speak, only bowed her head in assent. He laid his head on her lap. The sign he gave was like that of a tired child. Drew thought again, there's something he hasn't told me. What is it? Mechanically, her hand dropped to his smooth, dark head, and she stroked it gently, as a mother might comfort a child. Richard murmured vaguely, "It will be all right now. You are here. You wouldn't let me down." His breathing grew slow and even. He slept. Her hand still soothing his head, but her eyes looked steadily into the darkness in front of her, saying nothing. Didn't you think, retreated better tell me everything? It was 3 days later. They were in the drawing room before dinner. Like, what do you mean? Don't you? Well, of course, there are details. I ought to know everything. Don't you think about the help? What makes you think I want you to help, Richard? I'm your wife. So you are the very good looking wife. I never could steadily when he began walking up and down the room as was his custom when something was wanting him. I wouldn't deny your rights in a way. There is something. Yes. Ah, it's so damn hard to explain things of this kind of woman. They will get hold of a wrong end of the stick and fancy things is what it isn't. You see, the law is one thing and the right and wrong are another. I may do a thing that is perfectly right and honest, but the law wouldn't take the same view of it. 9 times out of 10, everything pans out all right, but 10th time, well, you can hit a sank. Why am I not surprised? Did I always know the downward he wasn't straight? Richard went on talking. He explained himself at unnecessary length. Theodora was consenting to him to cook the actual details of the affairs in this metal of verbosity of Amanda concerned a large tract of South African property. Exactly. What latter didn't she was not concerned to know. Morally, he accused her everything was found overboarded legally. Well, there was no getting away from the fact he had rendered himself liable for criminal prospectors. He kept shooting quick glances at his wife as he talked. He was nervous and uncomfortable. And still he excused himself and tried to explain why that which a child might have been and its naked truth. Then finally, in a burst of justification, he broke down. Perhaps Drew's eyes, momentarily scornful, had something to do with it. He sank down in a chair by the fireplace. He had his head in his hands. There it is. What are you going to do about it? He came over to him with scarcely a moment's pause, and kneeling down by the chair, put her face against his. What can be done, Richard? What can we do? She means you stick to you. You stick to me? By air of course, I am a thief. Yeah, that's what I mean. Sean, a fine language, just a thief. And I am a thief. His wife, Richard, will sink or swim together. So I have got a plan. We will talk a bit later. It's just been a time now. We must go on change. Put on that creamy thing with Bob of yours. Money of an evening at home. Yes, yes, I know, but I like it. Put it on this cooker. It cheers me up to see you looking your best. They all come down to dinner. It was a creation in cleaning board carts with a faint patters of a dog running through it and an undernote of pale pink to give more through cream. It was cut there in the low in the back, and nothing could have been better to show off a dazzling whiteness of Theo's neck and shoulders. She was truly now a Magnolia flower. God, you look simply stunning in that dress. They went into dinner throughout the evening. Richard was nervous and unlike himself, joking and laughing, but nothing at all, as if in a vain attempt to shake off his cares. Several times they will try to lead him back to the subject that had been discussing before, but he edged away from it. Then suddenly, as she rose to go to bed, he came to a point. No, don't go here. I have something to say, about this miserable business. With a bit of luck, this whole thing to be hushed up. I mean, I have covered my tracks fairly well. It's just these papers. There's certain papers as long as they don't get into the receiver's papers. You mean you will destroy them? When you look like destroy them fast enough, if I could get hold of them, that's what that will have it. Who has a man we both know? Vincent, these faint exclamation escape here. Arch, force it back yet, which would have noticed it. I suspected he knew something of the business all along. That's why I have asked him. here a good bit. You may remember you I asked you to be nice to him. Yes, I remember. Somehow I never seem to have got on really friendly terms with him. I don't know why, but he likes you. I don't say he likes you a good deal. He does. Well, that's good. Now you will see what I'm driving. I'm convinced that if you went to weekend, he asked him to give you those papers, he wouldn't refuse. You had pretty common that sort of things. I can't do that. It's out of the question. The red came slowly out in blotches on its face. My dear girl, I don't think you quite realized the position. If this come out, I am liable to go to prison. It's ruin and disgrace. Vincent Aston will not use those papers against you. I'm sure of it. But that's not quite the point. He might not realize that they would increment me. Don't be taken in conjunction with my affairs. The figures they are bound to find. I cannot go into details about the nude me without knowing he is doing it unless somebody puts a position devoid. You can do it yourself, surely. Write to him. No, we have only got one hope. You have a God who my wife was. Help me. If you go to East tonight, not tonight, tomorrow, perhaps not tonight, may God come to realize things tomorrow may be too late. If you could go now once the rooms, I know my teach, I know it's a piece missing the boat, but it's life or death. Ah, you wouldn't fail me. Said to do nothing to help me, not these reasons. It's life or death. Then I mean it. See? Yeah, it snapped upon a drawer of the desk. He took out a revolver. It was something critical about the action. It escaped notice. It's bad or soothing myself. Take the ra- I cannot take the racket. If you don't do as I ask you, I will be a dead man before morning. I swear to you, Stodley, that's true, Richard, not bad. Then help me if lumber revolver down on the table and knelt by her side to my daughter. If you love me, if you ever loved me to do this for me, you are my wife. See, I have no one else to turn on. One and on his voice when murmuring, leading the last to hurt her own voice, saying, yes, Richard, took it to the door, water into a taxi. Tarek instantly sprung up in incredulous delight. She stood in the doorway. A wrap of white ermine was hanging from her shoulders. Never Eastern bought actually looked so beautiful. You are come after all now, Vincent. Don't come any closer. It's not what you think. Here for my husband. He thinks you have some papers which may do him harm, and I have come to ask you to give him back. Give them to me, so that's it. I thought Hobson, Jacqueline's Lusa sounded familiar the other day. I couldn't play some at the minute. I don't know your husband. who connected with the film. Things have been going wrong there for sometimes. I was commissioned to look different to you this. But to put it plainly, that your husband is a swindler. She shook her head. It beats me. Will you wait for a minute or two? It will get the paper. She sat down in the chair. He went into the other room. Personally, he returned and delivered a small package into her home. Thank you. Have your match? Taking the Max Boxy profit. She knelt down by the fireplace when the papers were reduced to a pile of ashes. She stood up. Thank you, not at all. Please let me get your taxi. He put her into it, so her driver away a strange formal letter interview after the first fed. Not even that. Look at each other. Wow, what was that? And he would go away abroad and try forget. Sue leaned her head out of the window and spoke to the taxi driver. She could not go back at once to a house in Chelsea. She must have a breathing space, seeing Vincent again and shaken horribly. If only, if only, if only, if only. But she pulled herself up. Love for her husband, she had nothing, but she owed him loyalty. He was down, she must stick by him. Whatever else he might have done, he loved her. He was offense being committed against society, not against her attacks. A man heard on the white streets of Amsterdam. They come out on the hill and a breath of cool and invigorating air fanned the streaks. She had herself in hand again now. Taxi sped back towards Chelsea. Well, you are been a long time, have I? Yes, very long time. It all right. He followed her, a cunning look in his eyes, but his hands were shaking. It's all right. Is it? I burned myself. She went on into the study, sinking into a big armchair. Her face was that white and her whole body gripped with fatigue. She thought herself, if only I could go to sleep now and never, never wake up again. He was watching his glance. Shayad 30 kept coming and going. She noticed nothing. If he was beyond noticing, it went off quite all right, man. I will told him. You are sure they were the right paper? Did you look? No, I am not sure. I'm tell you. I don't bother me. Don't bother me, Richard. I cannot bear any more tonight. No, no. I see. He figured out the room. Present. He come over to her later hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. Don't touch me. Sorry, my nerves are on edge. I feel can't bear to be touched. I know, I understand. Fail. I'm so bad. I'm so bad. Sorry, I ought to go over this time of night. I know. And never dreamed to be subjected to any unpleasantness. Unpleasantness. Oh, you don't know, Richard. You don't know. I don't know what this night has cost me. What this night has cost me. God, I never been. You did that to me. I could have know that. I couldn't have best. Oh my God, he was kneeling my by now. He was kneeling by now, stamping his arms around, and she turned and looked at him with faint surprise. Oh, his words. So that last bit entered to her attention. I never been that. I never met that. What, Richard? You never met? What? Well, tell me, what was it you never met? Or don't speak of it. I don't want to know. I never wanted it. She was staring at him, wide awake now, with every faculty alert, words calm, clear, and distinct. You never meant what? What do you think happened? Didn't let say it don't happen. You think that I don't want you think, but think some Eastern asked the price for those letters. And you think that I paid him? I and never dreamed he was that kind of man. Didn't you? Why did you ask me to put that dress on this evening? Why did you send me there alone this time of night? You guessed he's scared for me and you wanted to save your skin at any cost. Even the cost of my own. Ah, I see now. You meant this from the very beginning. Or at last you saw it as possibility and I didn't theater you. You feel you can't deny it, Richard? I thought I know all there was to know about you years ago. I have now almost from the first day you were not straight as regrets the world. But I thought you were straight with me. Can you deny that I am saying this? This is something I must tell you. 3 days ago, when this blow fell on you, the servants told you I was away and the born of a country that was only partly true. I had gone away within Sundays. But we were at Nova. I saw a paper. I realized that had happened. Then, as you know, I come back. Richard, caught by the wrist, his eyes burned into hers back in the time. Yeah. Okay, back in time, Richard. I will inquire this. Hold on. Hold on. He stood by the mantelpiece, his hat thrown back. He looked handsome, rather noble. In that case, I can forgive. I cannot, I said. I cannot give in. Leaving you for another man? I snide. Not technically, perhaps, but intention, which is the same thing. Which is the same thing. But if I sign through love. You have not been faithful to me since our marriage. Ah, I know, in fact, I forgive because I really believed in your love for me. But that I think you have done tonight is different. It is an ugly thing, Richard. It is an ugly thing, Richard. Think no woman should forgive. You sold me your own wife to purchase safety. She picked up a wrap, turned toward the door. Deal. Where are you doing? Where are you doing? We all have to pay in this life, Richard. For my sin, I must pay in loneliness for yours. Well, you gamble with the thing you love and you have lost it. You are going to freedom. There is nothing to bend me here. He heard the door shut. He just passed, or was it a few minutes? Something fluttered down outside the window. Last two magnolia petals, soft, fragrant, and of Magnolia Blossom.